Hi, I'm Alvaro Alencar. I'm a member of the lymphoma section at the University of Miami. We're here at ASH 2022, and I wanted to take 5 minutes of your time to talk a little bit about what happened in lymphoma here at ASH. And so what we're seeing this year, compared to last year we had a lot of activity on CAR T cell therapy. What we're seeing this year in CAR T is just more of an evolution of CAR T. We continue to see longer follow-up, understanding better mechanisms that lead to greater problems with CRS, ICANS, so the toxicities, so trying to understand better what leads to toxicities, how to manage that, understand better which are the patients that respond, and seeing longer term follow-up really on that without really any groundbreaking news on any new CAR T, on any new lymphoma. What we really are seeing a lot of activities in bispecific antibodies. So they have the same mechanism of using T cells, and we're seeing a lot of longer follow-up, demonstrating that the responses are great, that the toxicity is very manageable, mostly grade 1, grade 2 toxicity, similar to CAR T, ICANS, CRS, but very manageable. But very interestingly seeing that those agents, whenever they work really well and tend to have very long-term follow-up with maintained responses. For example, glofitamab in large B-cell lymphoma now was just presented this weekend, and now is a New England Journal paper demonstrating the high activity and the sustained activity in the lymphoma. We're seeing obviously follow-up also in other lymphomas. For example, very interesting data with epcoritamab, another bispecific antibody with incredible activity in Richter transformation, which is typically a highly refractory type of lymphoma, showing very interesting single-agent data. And what we're starting to see now is these bispecific antibodies being combined with therapies and even more solid responses. But I think that the most interesting data at ASH this year is really the triangle studies, a plenary session, and it's going to demonstrate to us the role of autologous stem cell transfer consolidation and BTK inhibitors in mantle cell lymphoma. So in this large European study, almost 900 patients, they're comparing the addition of ibrutinib as part of induction, which we had seen some interesting data with ibrutinib with BR, but in this study is ibrutinib with R-CHOP, R-DHAP, and then evaluating the addition or removal of transplant consolidation after the induction. And what we see in this study is what we're slowly trying to see, or we're seeing more and more better in mantle cell lymphoma, is the questionable role of very intensive therapy and the growing role of bispecific or bispecific antibodies or biologic agents in mantle cell lymphoma. So in this study, what we have so far is that when you add ibrutinib to the induction, compared to transplant alone, there's really no difference. So the response rates are higher with the ibrutinib arms, but the benefit in failure-free survival disappears completely when you add ibrutinib and you were able to safely take transplant out. So we still don't have the data of transplant plus ibrutinib versus ibrutinib alone. What we have some data already is on follow-up, for example, that patients that receive transplant and then ibrutinib have a little more toxicity in the maintenance phase. But we're starting to see more and more that by adding ibrutinib to, or a BTK inhibitor probably in the near future, to induction regimens maybe allow us to completely eliminate the very intensive therapy and take transplant out of the game. On the same token of BTK inhibitors, we also have a late-breaking abstract demonstrating a comparison between ibrutinib and zanubrutinib. As we know, when we compared the second-generation BTK inhibitor, acalabrutinib, to ibrutinib, the responses were very similar. But we really had better tolerability with acalabrutinib, with this demonstrated slight superiority of acala compared to ibrutinib. But now with the zanubrutinib data, zanubrutinib also compared to ibrutinib, we're not only seeing superior tolerability with zanubrutinib, but also better progression-free survival, suggesting that really the second-generation BTK inhibitor is really superior to ibrutinib in CLL. We already have seen some data in Waldenstrom's, we have some data in mantle cell lymphoma, but now critical data in CLL. And on BTK inhibitors, it's important to also remember the non-covalent BTK inhibitor pirtobrutinib, which demonstrates fantastic activity even in covalent failures. So we're seeing pirtobrutinib with very solid responses in mantle cell lymphoma, very solid responses in CLL, and also, just like the epcoritamab, very interesting responses in Richter transformation. So I think that this is a great wrap-up with the main topics: bispecific antibodies, role of BTK inhibitors, and the longer follow-up in CAR T cell therapy. Thank you.